Hello and welcome to the first Forms Pro Update Overview webinar. My name is Megan Walker. I'm your host, organizer and presenter for this session. So just a few points before we begin. You're in listen only mode, but you have got access to a Q&A section, which should give you the ability to post questions as we go through the presentation. I won't have the ability to review those questions until the end, so please be patient and I'll get to those when I can. The webinar is being recorded, will be made available after the event. In this session, we're going to cover updates from October and from November, and also a couple that are coming soon. So let's go ahead and we'll begin. All right, so just before we get started, so if you are on this webinar, likely you've seen me online already, but I'm in a couple of different places. So if you're not already connected, go ahead and connect with me. I'm on Twitter, LinkedIn. I've got a YouTube channel where I post videos at least one a week. Also, you can contact me via email and also go to my website. Also, a couple of other things you might have seen, I've been sharing something called the MVP Advent Calendar, which is something that I'm organizing. And this is basically 24 MVPs that each day where somebody new is offering something different. So the concept of an Advent calendar where you can go to a door and open the door and there'll be some kind of prize or gift behind that door. So it'll be contests, it'll be giveaways, that kind of thing. So if you want to take part, all you need to do is just follow along either on Twitter or you can go to that URL mvp-advent.meganvwalker.com and you can go ahead and you can put in your details and you'll get notified each day. And then the next one, if you're in the UK or are close enough to be able to travel to the UK and interested in learning more about Forms Pro, you can go ahead and sign up for a course that I'm doing. It's an in-person classroom training course. You can go to courses.formspro.tips and find out more information, how you can go ahead and register to be part of that course. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the agenda. So the first thing we're going to look at is the simplification of the overall experience of Forms Pro and how that's been changed. The ability to go ahead and actually hide question numbers and also to make changes to the footer text. You can customize that. We'll also look at how you can skip contact creation and why that might be of interest. We've got some changes to the Excel upload process. We also will look at embedding the first question of your survey into an email. And then we'll look at unified survey variables and what that means. Also, we've got some changes to embedding surveys into websites, some improvements there, and also we've got anti-phishing support, so we'll cover that too. So let's go ahead and actually jump into Forms Pro. So here's my Forms Pro environment. So the first thing we're going to look at is that simplification of the experience. So I'm going to go to a survey that has got some results on there already. So if you recall with Forms Pro, before you would log in and you would look at a survey and you would actually have 3 tabs along the top. So it would be a slightly different experience to somebody that was used to Microsoft Forms, or if you were jumping between a form and a Forms Pro survey, they would be slightly different. So this has now simplified things. It's made it consistent between the two. So we have our questions on the left-hand side, and then we have our responses on the right-hand side. If we want to actually go ahead and send it, we have a send button over here on the top. So we can click to send. And then we have all of our settings and everything, branching rules from the ellipsis over here on the right-hand side. So again, it's got a consistent feel between Forms and between Forms Pro to where we have it exactly the same depending on which one we're using. We don't have to think, oh, where am I going? Where am I clicking to access this information? All right, so let's go over to a survey that I've created that doesn't really have much on there. I haven't actually sent it out yet. And let's start looking at some of these other things that have changed. So the first one on here, we can see that we've got 3 questions and we've got our question numbers. Oh, sorry, 4 questions. And let's go ahead and we can preview this and we can see those questions are displaying. So if I go ahead and we can see the number there, if I go back and I go to my ellipsis and I click on the settings, we now have an option to say, I don't want to show those question numbers. So I untick that and we can see those question numbers have disappeared. If I preview it again, we don't see the question numbers. So that's a nice little feature in terms of it. If you have maybe quite a lot of questions, you don't necessarily want someone to preempt how long that survey might take because they might see a lot of numbers. We can remove those numbers and just make it look a little bit neater. If I want to have those turned back on again, I can go back into my settings and let's go ahead and show those question numbers again. All right, so the next thing we can do is we can customize the footer text. So if I preview and I go down to the bottom, this footer text right here, we can see that it says the content is created by the owner of the form. The data you submit will be sent to the form owner. Never give out your password. So if I go back to my settings here from the ellipsis, I've got an option here, customize footer text. So I'm going to go ahead and tick that, and you'll see there that the text will show you what is there by default. And I'm going to go ahead and say this form was created by MVW Consulting Limited, or whatever you want it to be. Now, if once I've made that change, if I want to go back, I just untick it, and then it's going to put that default back in there for me. Okay. Now, one thing to keep in mind is you cannot put in you can't put in HTML tags. You can't make something bold or underlined or put URLs or anything like that in there at the moment. So it is raw text that you'll be putting in. Okay, so if we stay on this section for the settings, for the next one we've got is the ability to skip contact creation. So we can see that we've got right here this checkbox, add respondents as contact. So by default, that will be checked on your surveys. Now, what happens is if you are sending out the survey and you're sending it out via email and you're actually importing people in a CSV file and you're importing them to go ahead and send out those surveys, if the email address that's on the contact exists in your database, in Common Data Service, in your environment, then it will not create anything new. In fact, you can say you want to update that information if there's anything that's changed. However, if the email address does not exist, then when you go ahead and you upload that, then it will create a brand new contact. So you can see here that this would be quite a useful setting to have the ability to say, yes, I want contacts created, or no, I don't. So I can untick that so that we will not create brand new contacts when we go ahead and actually import a file of records. Okay, so with that in mind, if I go to the send area, and I say I want to go ahead and send an email, this is where we have our ability to go ahead and import recipients. So if I click on this, and we've got the ability to download a CSV file. All that says is it's got 3 columns. It's got email, first name and last name as their headers. You then fill out that information and import it. Now, previously, you used to be able to import 1,000 recipients at a time. So if you wanted to import more, you'd have to divide them up into multiple CSVs. Now you have a massive 10,000 recipients that you could import at one time. It does say if you've got more than that, split them into multiple CSV files. I would argue that if you've got more than that, you might want to rethink it and probably segment that information a little bit more, because 10,000 is a lot at one time to be sending out a survey to. So much better than 1,000 though. 10,000 gives you more than enough. And again, remember that goes hand in hand with that last setting where we say, do we want to actually create a contact or not? Remember, if that is ticked and you're importing records where those email addresses are brand new, it will create a contact record. Okay, so just something to consider if you're doing that. All right, so next let's go ahead and look at the option to embed the first question. So I'm on my email screen. Notice that I've got this option to embed first question. If I hover my mouse over that, we'll see that it says ensure in your survey that the first question is a rating or a net promoter score, and that shuffling questions is not enabled and branching rules are not defined. So let's go back here and let's look at what it's referring to. If I go into the settings, we have shuffling questions. So if I had that turned on and I'm shuffling questions, we can't embed. And then also we have the branching rules. So if I've set up some branching rules, then I'm not going to be able to do it. So I'm going to go to, let's look at this one. Nope, let's pick a different one. 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 Let's pick a diff There we go. So I'm going to go ahead and I can click on embed first question. And what that will do is it will take the first question from the survey and it will put it into this email. Um, I can only do this from within Forms Pro and the email. I cannot do this if I'm sending it out through using Microsoft Power Automate. So I have to use this if I want to embed the first question. Now also keep in mind that if you've got a template that you've created and you go ahead and embed the first question, you cannot save a template with that first question in there. It will also remove the template that you had on there. So it's nice if you want to just go ahead and send something out quickly and you just want to say, hey, what's this? You know, what's the answer to this? Then when they answer it, they go from the email, they go out into the survey, it opens up in the browser, and then they're able to continue on with the rest of the survey. So nice feature to have, but again, it's only going to be possible if you're doing this from within Forms Pro itself. All right, so let's go ahead and look at unified survey variables. All right, so what do we mean by that? So the variables, if I just go back here and we look under the ellipsis, if I go to survey variables, we'll see that there are some variables that are set up. So we've got first name, we've got last name. What you're going to find, let's go to a previous survey that I'd created. Okay, what you're going to find though on some of them, if you go to send, you'll see this message here. Now, this message will appear on surveys that you'd created previously to the latest update. And what likely you will find if you go to click on define survey variables, you'll find two in there. You'll find email and URL. Those existed previously if you were going to embed your survey onto your website. They existed at that point. Now, it might be that you were using those, so they haven't been removed. But if you're not using them and you see that message, you want to get rid of them, you can just go ahead and you can delete them. And when you've done that, the message will disappear. So again, those were from a previous thing that was set up to where if you were embedding your survey, those were parameters that you could pass through into that survey when you embedded it on your website. So you can just get rid of that. Now, in order to be able to go ahead and create new ones, let's go back to this survey right here. If I go into my survey variables, what I can do is I can go ahead and rather than just saying, we recently closed a case for you on this support feedback survey, I might want to say, we recently closed case number 1234 with case title, something was broken, whatever that might be. You'll see there that first name and last name exist. Those are parameters that exist by default. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add in a new variable. I'm going to call this one case number. And I'm going to add another one. And I'm going to call this one case title. Now, what you'll see is that we have where it's asking for a default value. Now, if you've ever used a marketing tool to send out emails of any kind, you'll know that you've for the most part, you've got the ability to go ahead and put merge fields in or parameters or variables, whatever you want to call them. But if your data isn't very good and you have maybe first name missing on some, which hopefully you don't, but instead of first name, if that's missing, you can say, hi, Megan, if you've got the first name, or you could say, hi, valued customer, or whatever it might be. So the default value is what will show is if you send out the survey and for some reason in your database, the data isn't very good and you don't actually have those parameters. So the likelihood of not having a case number when we're sending out a question about a case is highly unlikely, but you have to put something in there. So I'm just going to go ahead and put the same thing in again. So that's what it's for, but likely you should have that sort of information in your database. However, if you are starting to send out surveys and you are sending things and you don't always have those fields filled out, then that's what you would be using for. All right, so we've set our variables. At the moment, Forms Pro doesn't know what on earth those mean. It could be apples and pears, it could be anything. It's just words at this point. Now what we need to do is we need to say, where do we want to use these variables? And then how do we get the data into those variables? So what I'm going to do is I've added those. I'm going to come up here, instead of just saying, we recently closed a case for you, I'm going to put the person's name first of all. So I'm going into the description and clicking on variables, and there's that first name that was already there by default. I'm going to put first name, we recently closed, case number, and then I can scroll down. I can see there's the case number variable that I added. So we recently closed case number, and then I'm going to use that case title for you. Your feedback will help us improve our services. So we can see there that we've used those different variables. You can also use the variables in a question, as well as in the descriptions underneath questions as well. So those are the different places. If I go to send my survey, and if I do an email, then what I can do is I can put in a variable from here. So I could put first name as the variable there. But then the real value, and this is where I need to use it to be able to actually get those different variables from other records in my database, is if I go to Microsoft Flow, and I'm going to go ahead and configure a flow. And I'm just going to do one of the templates just for time's sake, just so we can see it. I'm going to use the send a survey when a case is resolved in Dynamics 365. And we're just going to go ahead and create this flow, or Power Automate. I think it needs to be updated too. So it says we've configured a flow. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click back on my home button, and now we'll see that we've got some flows configured. So let's go with this one. So this is just to show you what you need to do on the flow. You'd obviously have your own flow that you'd created in Power Automate, and then it's up to you to determine where you're putting those variables. But in this, we're basically saying when a case is closed, we're going to basically send out a survey to the person that was the contact on the case. So if I now open up this Forms Pro step, you can see there's the first name and the last name. It's been populated, but those two additional variables that I added are now empty, and I need to tell this flow what those variables should be. So I can then search for case number when that record is updated. So when the case is closed, that's the case number from that case. So then I can also do case title and put that in as well. So this is how we use those variables to then pass the data back and forth to say, I'm sending you a request to fill this out. When they then open up that email and click on the link and take them to the survey, those variables will have been passed through, so they'll be able to see that information. So it's really just kind of bringing everything together and putting the variables all in one place. Now, another place with the variables, if I go into the send option and I go to embed, I can have variables that I add here, but when I click new variable, it would add the variables back in the same place. So everything is consistent in one place. All right, so what we've also got on the embed option is we have improvements to where previously, if you were putting a survey into a website, it would be set in the standard mode, and there's a lot of white space that would show up between the questions. So what we've got now is the ability to have a compact mode. If I click compact, you'll see what it's going to look like is just kind of reducing things and reducing that white space. And then we generate the code, and we can copy that and we can use that in our website to embed the information. So just a slight change there in terms of how that will then display and how that will render in your web page. It just makes it look a little bit neater and compact. All right, so the other thing that's been added here is we've got the anti-phishing support. Now, this does not actually work yet in my environment, it hasn't been rolled out. But if you were to add a question like this, where you're saying, please share your password, or you're asking for account information, then that will actually lock the survey and prevent anyone from filling that out. So I haven't seen that yet in my environment, but that should be on its way and with you very soon. So let's look at a couple of other things that they are not out just yet. They are available general release next month. However, if you are interested in having either of these items in your environment, then let me know, because I can put you in touch with the right person. You could get that ahead of time if needed. So the first one is if you are doing multilingual surveys, and so you're basically setting them up and you have all your translations for each language, then it's a bit time consuming to go ahead and type everything out for each language. So this would be the ability to upload survey translations across multiple languages from a single template file. So that could save you quite a lot of time. And then we've also got something that I think is really cool, and I think a lot of people have been asking for this, and that is survey expiration. You've got that on the survey at the moment. You can set an expiration date, but this will allow you to close the survey after a certain number of responses have been received. So if you're doing some kind of contest, competition of some sort, and you maybe only want to get 30, 40, 50 responses, you can have it close after you've hit that number of responses. Or the other option, which I think is really cool, is you can set a certain number of days after a survey invitation is sent out. So it might be that you want to say, right, well, if I haven't got a response after 5 days, I'm going to actually close that survey, or after 30 days or whatever it might be. So those are two really cool things that are coming out. So hopefully those will make people's lives a lot easier. There's some really good improvements there. Okay, so hopefully you found this valuable. This is the first webinar. I'll be doing one each month when there's new new features that have come out. So the next one I'll be doing is on December the 18th of this year, obviously, December 18th, at the same time on a Wednesday as well. So you can go ahead and go to link.meganvwalker.com/webinar. So unfortunately, we don't have time for any questions, but if you do have anything, you can reach out to me on Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, send me an email, or go ahead and check out my website. There's lots of stuff on there. I've got content for Forms Pro. I don't know, over 40 different things now I think are on my website. So hopefully you found this useful and you've learned something from it, and you can see some really cool features that are going to be of value to you, and hopefully you can join me for next month. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.